All right, so today we have the weekly recall called Meet Your Matchmaker, and it's basically a blog post on matchmaking. So this week's, I'm going to read what they say. This week, we're pulling back the metaphorical curtains to share more about one of Overwatch's most complex topics, matchmaking. Dun, dun, dun. That was exactly what was there. There are two major goals we're trying to accomplish with our matchmaking systems: to create fun matches and to try to keep you from waiting too long to jump into them. That second goal is self-explanatory, but the first is a bit more nebulous. Now, just to put my matchmaking definitely will have its moments where like it feels really scuffed at times, and hopefully they kind of go into why it does, right? There's a lot of variations that can happen. So like obviously when you increase the range, the matchmaking will be a little bit wider. They call it like wide ranges and things like that, and that could be kind of when those matches get really scuffed because they're trying to get the queue time. So we'll see if they talk about that. Our matchmaking philosophy is that fun stems from fairness. In an ideal scenario, both teams in a match would have a 50% chance of victory. The outcome of that match would depend entirely on the choices, strategies, and big plays of each person in the lobby. Winning is fun, of course, but player agency and the idea of a competitive or winnable match is something we found to be even more important. When you feel as though your actions matter and any outcome is possible, that makes for a compelling game of Overwatch. Well, yeah, and well, the problem is that when people, when people go to the blog post, right, and not the blog post, when they play a game, they don't want to hit the scoreboard and see that they're all 2-12 and the other team is 35-2. Now, there's a lot of dynamics that go into that, but like, yeah, that's not going to feel good if you hit tab and you see that, right? Or whatever you're on. That means the scoreboard. It says, let's jump into how we approach this in both the core mode as well as Stadium. I'm interested on Stadium because I get so many questions about Stadium matchmaking and I have no idea how to answer them, so hopefully this gives me more information. Matchmaking 101. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, it's important to understand how matchmaking works. Every Overwatch player, or every Overwatch 2 player has a matchmaking rate and MMR number that acts as an approximation of their skill and is used to place them in matches. While you see your MMR as a labeled skill tier, such as Diamond 3, we view it internally as a data point on a bell curve where the center is 0.0. As you go up or down from that point, the number of players on either side drops dramatically. Now, I want to point out, that's what I always say with like hidden MMR, where like, if they decay you out. So decay is, I think it exists in the game still, but it's like if you don't play for a long time. Like if you don't play the game for a while, like your MMR, even though your rank is different, like your MMR might be like diamond and you're still diamond, but it's kind of all over the place. So, but anyway, so it says competitive distribution by skill tier. So 2.4% players are in bronze. 12.6% are in silver, 31.7% are in gold, 34.9% are in plat, 14.9% are in diamond, 3.2% are in master, 0.3% are grandmaster, and 0.1% are champion. So kind of shows you the numbers where everybody is. So according to this, if you're in plat, you're right in the middle of like this curve here. You're right there. Gold and plat seem to be where that is. So a lot of, apparently, you just like combine gold and plat there, it's like what? Close to 69%. If you include bronze there, just so I can say 69% and then say nice. But basically that's kind of where you're at. Is like in between there. It's like 67%. Let's say someone is internally rated a 2, which is considered a high skill player around Masters 5. As soon as they queue up, the system tries to find players that are also rated at 2. If it can't manage to find a full lobby of players at that exact MMR in a set period of time, it expands outward both positively and negatively to fill the match. That final lobby may have a skill range between 1.9 and 2.1, what should feel quite balanced. It is actually an interesting thing they bring up there because some people are like, yeah, like you're getting longer queues, which means you're getting higher quality. And I try to explain, I'm like, no, that's the exact opposite of what happens. The longer the queue, the worse match quality because it takes, so basically as the queue gets longer, the range they look for is wider. So if I end up in a 30-minute queue, there's a very high chance that game quality will not be good. Now, obviously, there's going to be like outliers where other people of that range queue up and it brings the game together, but that's how you get those really imbalanced games. The longer the queue, the worse the game probably will end up being. And that's something that we've known because it's not where you think that, oh, the longer the queue, the better, right? It's more like the longer the queue, the worse the quality of the game. Okay, build in the best match. Mathematically, the best match will include 10 players of approximately the same skill. If in reality we can't create the ideal match, what trade-offs are we making to get as close as possible? We have a bunch of matchmaking systems that try to ensure balanced matches. One system that helps achieve this is called Roll Delta. It aims to match the skill levels of individual roles on both sides of the lobby. In those cases where we can't create a match, where all of the players are exactly the same MMR. For example, if one team's tank has a 1.5 MMR rating, Role Delta will do its best to find another tank rated 1.5 to compete against them in a specific match. This makes for a less frustrating experience because players go head-to-head with similar skilled opponents. So similarly, but anyway, one thing I want to point out about this with the Role Delta is this made it feel better when they added this, because what it used to be is that you'd have somebody under that 1.5 MMR rating on tank, and then the other team would have a 1.5 MMR rating on DPS or support. How can those two, there's such different roles that the way that they'll assist the team can be way differently, and one of them could end up with an advantage because of how that plays out, right? So they added Role Delta, I want to say at the beginning of Overwatch 2. I don't remember if it was at the end of Overwatch 1. I think it was Overwatch 2, or at the beginning of it, and it helped a lot in that sense. Obviously, it's not going to fix all stuff. There are also many works we can relax match quality and work with a more realistic matchmaking framework. We weigh these options against team-level fairness as well as player-level fairness. The former relates to the probability that Team 1 will beat Team 2, and the latter is at the role level. For example, what are the chances that one team's damage player will noticeably outperform the other team's damage dealers? If you ask anybody, it's probably every game. So, I don't know if they'll talk about it here, but one thing I do want to mention when it comes to, matchmaking, the one thing the matchmaker will never be able to take into account, and I'll use me as an example, the matchmaker will never be able to take into account that I got 4 hours of sleep that night, And I think that's the one thing that is so hard to solve with matchmaking, because you can have all this math and data that's okay, this player is also going to be as good as this player based off of what we have at MMR, but if that player just doesn't have a good game, it may be a lot more lopsided than it should be, because one player maybe just isn't having the best game right there, right? They're going to talk about stadium matchmaking apparently in this. So sometimes that's just one thing you just can't take into account, right? Hey, somebody went out on a Friday night, had a good time, came home to play a couple games of ranked. Can't really, you can't account for that, right? It's so there's just a lot of things that can't necessarily be accounted for, but doesn't mean that they can't make it better and better. I want to reiterate that. Role Delta was partially motivated by these team-level fairness assessments. We noticed that if one team had a vastly higher rated tank, win rates were distorted in a way that wasn't reflected by simply assembling matches based on a flat MMR rating or the sum of the entire team's MMR rating. We just talked about that. It's relatively easy for us to consistently make matches fair on a team level thanks to the system in place. In competitive mode, we take steps to ensure that the absolute lowest win rate probability a team encounters is 40%. I mean, we can take queue times into account, but doesn't that seem like that's not going to feel good if you go into with a 40% predicted win rate against a team that has a 6? I can imagine those games are not looking too hot on the. I imagine those games are probably the most scuffed games. I imagine that number is they don't want to be at that number, but they must have found something that put it at that number. Anyway, that would be an outlier though. Most matches, 80% of competitive role queue have a win rate probability within the 45 to 55% range. Doesn't it seem like that's still high if 20% of those matches are still getting that, though? I feel try to get in that to 15%, maybe 10% of that. I mean, again, I don't have all the data or the stuff, but I feel that's still 1 in 5 matches for players could feel really scuffed. I feel that's a really high number. So, yeah, anyway. Creating lobbies with a narrow skill range is important because inconsistencies show up at the team level. A team of Silver 2 players will approach coordination and communication very differently than a stack of Diamond 2 players. Well, yes. If a team includes both of those skill tiers, it's likely that both sides will believe their counterpart is playing ineffectively or incorrectly. So you're saying that if you're... Okay, I get what you're saying. Yes. Yeah. If you have a Silver 2 player in a game and you're a Diamond 2, the way that you play is obviously going to be different, yes. I mean, that's... We see that a little bit in general. We always talk about that. Every rank plays differently. It's why when I do my spectatings, you notice how I try to... When I first started spectatings, I wasn't good at this part. I would just kind of go hey, this is what I do in my GM games. And then as I started to spectate more, I recognized and realized I need to teach people things about the game based off of the rank they're at. People would be no, just tell that player to just hit their shots. I'm yeah, but the problem is that fundamentally I'm watching them do a bunch of things that if they clean up, they don't need to get better shots. They're going to climb because they're improving in these areas. So what I do is each rank I try to give feedback based off of the rank they're in, rather than like, oh, just do this because this is what I do in top 500. Because that's not the case, because you're getting different teamwork, different ways people play. So, okay. Player level fairness is a much more difficult thing to achieve, and it's one of the leading reasons why queue times can sometimes be unpredictable. Assembling a lobby of 10 similar MMR ratings can be tricky if there are lower player populations online, like at extremely high skill levels, off-peak hours, or in low population regions. In the past, we've experimented with extending the MMR range allowed in matches to mitigate longer queue times for these cases. Unsurprisingly, the matches ended up less balanced and less fun as a result. We're always analyzing the trade-offs we're making between queue times and match quality and tweaking our systems for better outcomes. You'll find it very common that in top 500, we'll go, dude, listen, I just wish I got a game. And they're like, okay, we're going to increase the range. And then we get that game and we go, that was terrible. What's up with the matchmaking? Okay, we're going to decrease the range. Back and forth. Just back and forth. Just completely just the same back and forth right there. Okay, and then you asked about Stadium. Well, here you go. Yeah, I mean, that's just going to be a back and forth problem on that one. The Stadium situation. We've talked a lot about how matchmaking in general works and how it applies to Overwatch's competitive modes. But Stadium is an entirely different animal, and we want to dive deeper into that. Unlike Overwatch's core mode, Stadium rank isn't tied directly to MMR. Instead, MMR serves as a goalpost toward what you can climb as you play more Stadium matches. Ranks reset in Stadium every season, and every player begins at Rookie, gaining more points as you play. You may have noticed that you often get more points for winning a game of Stadium than you do for losing, which allows you to climb faster. In core modes, this would never work since MMR needs to be zero-sum to function. You'll gain the same amount of MMR for a win as the other team loses. That's why MMR and approximate Stadium skill tiers sometimes don't match up. Two players with similar MMR ratings and similar amounts of one Stadium games will have very similar ranks, but someone with a high core MMR will start in Rookie since they're new to the mode. Since Stadium's calibration differs so much, we have two options. Put players together based on Stadium MMR or on a Stadium rank. Putting players together based on rank feels awkward since actual rookies will be playing alongside high MMR players. So for the moment, we're assembling matches based on Stadium MMR. While this means you may see a rookie in your high rank games, that player's Stadium MMR reflects their actual skill. We're evaluating ways to make matchmaking smarter so that situation happens less often. And I've tried explaining that to people, by the way, where I'm like, where I try to say like, oh yeah, like I have like this rank in my game, etc. It's because your hit MMR is different. The one thing I will say, and one of the problems that, again, this is niche and they probably won't fix it, but like imagine if you're in like that All-Star Legend, I mean, maybe even like whatever's before All-Star, I think it's Elite, or maybe it's the whatever one. You get to Rookie, and they're like, by the way, you're going to be in the same lobbies as a pro. You're going to be in the same lobbies as you were last season, whether you were in Legend. Also, here's the queue times that go with that. So they expect the players to want to grind that back up, and I get having the grindy-based systems, etc. I get that, right? But if you're resetting people back down to Rookie in Stadium, and then they're hit with long queue times, that's going to kind of disincentivize people from wanting to go and climb that again, right? Like if you're a support player and you get to All-Star and you're like, okay, I want to play Stadium, but like I'm still in Rookie and I'm getting 20-minute queues. Like unless I'm winning 100% of my games, this isn't going to feel good, right? So I know people have stopped queuing Stadium sometimes because of that, because it's like you just, if the queue times are fine, it's all good, right? But they really need to figure out ways on how to make the support players get into games more. I accounted to it's kind of a good problem they have because support is so fun. The flip side, what they really need to focus on, and I hope they address this in the midseason patch because it's important, you need to give other build paths for the other roles. If you're telling DPS players, hey, queue up and you're just going to go weapon power build, not everybody's going to want to do that. If you're telling tanks, hey, by the way, you're going to get rolled by a Zarya every game, which, I mean, it's not the case, right? But, like, they're going to go, well, I can just go and play this. So you need to find ways to create better build paths. That's why it's been a little bit disappointing at times when they, like, nerf, like, I'll give you an example. They nerfed the Junker Queen build. There was no reason to nerf that Junker Queen build. It was fine. It would be beat by a lot of comps. It was really fun. It made players want to play Queen. Then they nerfed it. And you're like, why? So it's like, I really do think that they should start to focus more on build paths to give multiple ways to play the heroes. Because if you're telling DPS players to queue up and they can only play melee Genji and only play weapon power casts, they're just not going to queue up as much. So I kind of hope they go that path. I keep in mind, I still like Stadium, but I've seen that issue. Like, the way to get the support queues fixed is to get other roles queuing. And if you don't give the roles those same type of, like, exciting builds, because let's be real here. I don't know about y'all, chat. Support has really fun builds in Stadium. Like, really fun. Like, really, really fun. And a lot of them have multiple ways to play those roles, too. So you have 3-4 builds you can go on most of those characters, right? So, you guys see the cat? Yeah, he's right there. So anyway, so the point I'm making is, like, they really need to focus on that going there. So hopefully it's in the midseason patch, which I'm excited to see what they have for midseason. And if it isn't, I hope by season 18 they start to improve those build paths, because I'm telling you, that's where people are kind of like, you know. Anyway, it says queue times are also something we're looking at for Stadium, but improvements may only come with time. Long queues are affecting high-skill players in specific roles, namely support, due to low population of players at that skill level, as well as general role disparity. We're actively thinking of ways to improve the situation here, and we'll share more as our plans evolve. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about matchmaking. And I just want to point out, they just said that, like, they're looking for solutions. And that's what is the problem, is that you need to incentivize the other roles to have exciting build paths, right? Yes, you're going to have players who want to play Weapon Power Cassidy, but why not have a fun flashbang build, right? One that's actually good. Why not have a better High Noon build path? And they haven't really focused on that yet, so we'll see. Anyway, I'm glad that they kind of had a blog post like this. It's good to get more information, and it was fun to kind of talk about some of the stuff there. So, good blog post overall. Learned more about stuff, and hopefully it leads to continued. Hopefully they can get to a matchmaking they're happy with. So, there you go. Hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the YouTube. Hope you all have an amazing day /night.